Hi, everyone, and thanks for being with me. I'm going to talk today to you about anti Semitism in Australia. Now, I've taken a few days to think about this because it's been weighing heavily on my mind, and I wanted to share with you the weight that sits with discussing something as horrific as the hate towards one group versus another. That hate is in itself is divisive. Hate, which equals terrorism to some extent, is repulsive, and I, as a pacifist, certainly would call out any form of hate, no matter who's doing it, no matter from what side of politics it comes. Hate is destructive. But we need to accept the fact that there's a lot of hate in the community, that people, like even on my paltry little channel, I get people who hate me for they don't know me, but they don't like what I say, and they say hateful and what they think I think is hurtful things. I understand that people are disgusting generally, and those that are disgusting express their disgust in ways which can be violent. And anti Semitism should never be tolerated, that it is wrong in every possible level, and those people that think it, that act upon it, that do things as destructive as attempting to burn down a synagogue, which happened last week, is repulsive and should be called out for what it is, which is denigrating another person's right to be able to worship in whichever way they like. That is fine, and I'm really clear about that. So if anybody wants to come at me later on, feel free. Demonstrate your own hatred if you wish, but then remember you fall into that category where the hate is divisive and it's wrong. Now, it doesn't mean that we can't have a reasonable debate, and it can't mean that we can say things that are controversial, and that we're certainly entitled in this country at the moment to be able to do just that. So I want to take us to where this notion around anti-Semitism has developed and how it's being used to develop the a political foundation, I think, for arguments in the future about which side one person should elect over another. And the important thing to me, though, is that when we're thinking about this, we need to think about, I think, three things. We need to think about the Jewish community and their right to be able to practice their religion and their beliefs in the way that they choose to, and to acknowledge that the Jewish community have been a persecuted community, not just for the last 70 odd years, but for hundreds of years, and we need to acknowledge that history for the Jews, I think, as we need to acknowledge the persecution of any minority group, or any group for that matter, minority or otherwise, where they're persecuted. We need to understand the suffering that causes and the distress it causes those people that experience it. So I'm acknowledging all of that right here and right now. So that's number one. Number two area I think we need to acknowledge is that it's not just the Jewish people that suffer from this, it's also the Muslim community. And Islamophobia is a thing, as is anti-Semitism, and both are wrong. But there is a certain degree of Islamophobia in the community as well, and we need to acknowledge that. You can't deny it. I think if you're a Muslim person, particularly a woman, you're walking down the street and you've got a hijab on, that you're likely to receive some nasty comments from people in relation to that. and that's wrong. So let's call that out for what it is. And then on the other hand, you've got the Israeli Defense Forces. Now, I see them as totally different. I see that as a political power endeavouring to be able to influence and destroy another country, in this case Gaza, which wasn't a country, I guess, but which was annexed. And I guess one of the problems for me is that because you decide that you're standing against the genocide that's happening in Gaza, for some reason, even though that is a comment you're making against the IDF, for some reason, that makes you anti-Semitic. And I'm just drawing the line in the sand saying that is not the case. That is not the case. IDF is, I think, an evil organisation. An evil organisation who are endeavouring to wipe out a whole race of people under the guise that it's about getting rid of a terrorist group. And I think that is wrong. The destruction of anyone, no matter who they are, because they happen to be living in a certain area, and it doesn't mean that they all within that area support Hamas either. That is not true. But nevertheless, IDF, the destruction of Gaza, the occupation of the West Bank, and how they behave generally against Palestinians is also wrong. It is as wrong as anti-Semitism. But it is the behaviour of a government, not a religious group. And I think we need to be really, really clear about that definition. But this has become political, and we need to be clear about why. And I'm about to present to you some sections of some examples of where this has been discussed, particularly on Sky News, who are determined to make as much political ground around this as they can. And they're working hard at it, I can tell you. So I'm just going to play a few minutes of some assortment of clips that I've put together that kind of highlight that very point.
For your time, let's start with this attack on the Melbourne synagogue and the suggestion by Benjamin Netanyahu the Labor government is anti-Semitic and has effectively encouraged this attack. What do you make of that?
Well, Andrew, it's a tragedy and it's a national disgrace. It should never have happened, and nobody should be surprised by the fact that it has happened, which is part of the tragedy. The fact is that the Prime Minister took a deliberate decision 13 months ago to play down the level of anti-Semitism in the community, and the government's policies right up to this very day have made it less safe for people of Jewish faith in our country.
So he would say, I condemned the Opera House protests, called for them not to go ahead. I said Israel had a right to defend itself. I've condemned every act of anti-Semitism. As a former Home Affairs Minister, what more could the government be doing to protect the Jewish community in Australia right now?
Well, Andrew, you summed the Prime Minister up very well. He said, but he never does, and that's the problem. And that's what's given rise to what we've seen now. The campuses and the activity that we've seen on our university campuses over the last period was deplorable. It went on for months and months. There were no red lines. Attacks on MP offices, cars being attacked, people locking themselves inside synagogues, etc. It just has no place in our country whatsoever. And the Prime Minister set the tone on October 9 last year when, as you say, on the steps of the Opera House, there were deplorable scenes, and it should have been sent, a very clear message should have been sent at that point, that we have zero tolerance for racism and anti-Semitism in our country.
No one should play politics, of course, with this. It's too serious.
How would you react differently now, though? You were Home Affairs Minister. Let's say you're Prime Minister. It's possible in a few months' time. What would you be doing at the moment? I mean, if you don't know who the perpetrators are of this attack, for example, what can you actually do that they're not doing?
Well, Andrew, the Prime Minister won't even use the word terrorist attack. And that says something in itself.
We all stand here today to condemn in the strongest possible terms, this hateful, violent attack on a beautiful, peaceful place of worship.
We can't have in Australia, let alone Victoria, let alone Melbourne, this kind of violence. And it's totally unacceptable. It's an abomination.
Lots of words there from our politicians, but there is a problem here that has led to this disgraceful act. Let's start with the Victorian government. They have been weak and condescending since October 7. No one should play politics, of course, with this. It's too serious.
The terrorist attack at a Das synagogue was just the latest in a long list of anti-Semitic attacks that has occurred on the Prime Minister's watch in our country since October the 7th last year.
No one should play politics, of course, with this. It's too serious.
And that's my point. My point is that everybody will be playing politics with this, and that they are. Now, I'm going to take us now, if you're still with me, and I hope you are, to a news article in the Sydney Morning Herald, which I think sort of talks a little bit about this and tells us exactly what it is we should be thinking, maybe, or just a different way, a different perspective from what I've just shown you. So Foreign Minister Penny Wong, so it's called Albanese, Wong defends Australia's stance on Israel following criticism from Netanyahu. And we need to be conscious, I think, of the fact that most of what you just saw has come as a result of this attack on the synagogue. But a lot of this has been driven by Netanyahu, and this is where the politics comes in. So the government has made a decision how they're going to vote in the United Nations with regard to the resolution about a two-state solution for Israel. And because the government's changed its perspective or its language around this and has sat with another 145 countries, I hasten to add, as in relation to this resolution, and are stepping outside of this bubble which incorporates the United States and Israel, and are choosing to think differently about this, then that has brought about a political response. But Foreign Minister Penny Wong has castigated opponents, blaming the government for rising anti-Semitism, and Anthony Albanese has stood by his diplomatic posture towards Israel after Benjamin Netanyahu tied Labour's extreme anti-Israel position to the firebombing of a synagogue. How political can you get? Well, it has, and Netanyahu's driving this. And, you know, my version of Netanyahu is this is an evil dude, that he's doing things in Gaza and destroying a whole group of people. Over 44,000 people have been killed, mostly women and children. And in this, that's the point I really want to make. In this debate about anti-Semitism, we don't hear any of these other people, those people that I just played for you, Freudenberg, Price, Dutton. We don't hear them talking about the catastrophe, the disgusting catastrophe, which actually is Gaza. And the question I'm asking myself all the time is, why don't we? Why don't we hear this conversation about what's happening, which is caused by IDF, not Jewish people, not Jewish religious people. In fact, a lot of the old traditional religious Jews don't support the government in what they're doing. There are a lot of Jews who do not support what the government is doing. There are a lot of people in Israel who don't support what the government is doing in Gaza, even though Israel's done all that it can to limit the news coverage that comes out of Gaza. So the Israel Prime Minister's extraordinary statement has placed global attention on deteriorating relations between Australia and its long-time friendly nation in the Middle East. So be it. Sparking calls from the pro-Israel opposition to urgently mend ties and intensifying a dispute over Labor's management of tensions stemming from the war. This is why it's become political, because the lobby groups are suggesting that those relationships should be mended with a government who are creating a genocidal, who are behaving in a genocidal manner in Gaza. There's no way in the world we should ever have sided with Israel on this issue. Wong characterised the criticism of Labor's approach as grounded in politics, not facts, emphasising that Labor's voting in the UN was aligned with like-minded nations such as Canada and Britain, whose diplomats have increasingly lost patience with Israel's long-running war effort. Turning this into a political fight is reckless, even for opposition leader Peter Dutton, she told this masthead in a statement. The Liberals also used to support a balanced two-state solution, but now they are a political advantage in trying to reproduce the conflict here. And in my view, that's the whole point. That they're trying their best to make it a political issue so that they can gain votes and support from the Jewish community. I'm not sure that there's some in the Jewish community that do support what the IDF are doing in Israel. IDF does not necessarily equate to the Jewish community. It doesn't. There are many people in Israel who are not Jewish. So we need to be clear about all of that. Now, can I ask you to let me know what you think? Subscribe to my channel, ring the bell for notifications. I'm sure there'll be plenty of you out there with a particular view around all of this. In the meantime, take care, look after yourselves, and more importantly, be safe.